My sister humiliated me at her wedding and threw me out like a stranger. But I taught her an unforgettable lesson. I'm Gabriel, 32, and I always believed family should be a refuge when life gets tough. But I learned that to my sister Juliana, I was more of an obstacle, a smudge she tried to erase from her important moments. From a young age, I learned to work hard and depend on no one but myself. I'm not a flashy guy, not into extravagance, but I've forged my own path through discipline, saving, and careful decisions. I've built a stable life with 2 homes earned over years of sacrifice, one of which I rent out for extra income. I don't live surrounded by opulence or pretend to be something I'm not. My lifestyle is simple, practical, and full. Real wealth, to me, is enjoying a cold beer with friends after a long day or sharing a good conversation with people I genuinely care about. I've never worried about what others think of my clothes, my car, or how I spend money, because in the end I know those things don't define a person. Juliana, on the other hand, has always valued image over substance. She measures life with superficial yardsticks, as if the only things that matter were labels and picture-perfect social media posts. At 28, Juliana was obsessed with projecting upper-class status. Her job as a legal secretary barely covered her expenses, but that never slowed her down. She bought designer pieces at clearance sales and made it seem like she frequented exclusive restaurants when she was really ordering the cheapest item on the menu. She wanted everyone to think she mingled with influential people, even though reality was far from that facade. Her life was an empty showcase where image mattered more than anything else. Our parents, Carlos and Veronica, were always stuck in the middle. Dad, retired, even-tempered, spent his days fixing things around the house or helping neighbors. Mom, more emotional and conciliatory, tried to mediate whenever Juliana and I clashed, but she often leaned Juliana's way with the excuse that she's the youngest. We have to understand her. That dynamic frustrated me, because no one seemed to notice how cruel Juliana was to me. My pain was invisible to the people who were supposed to protect me. Everything started to unravel during what should have been a regular family lunch. It was a Sunday, the house filled with the smell of fresh sancocho and a table full of dishes Mom cooked with love. The 4 of us sat together, Dad, Mom, Juliana, and me, chatting about trivial things when Juliana, wearing that haughty look she used whenever she wanted the spotlight, dropped a bomb that changed everything. Raising her glass of juice like royalty, she announced she was getting married. My parents leapt up in joy. Mom even cried, and Dad, more reserved, patted her back, mentioning Esteban, her boyfriend, with hopes he'd be worthy. We weren't close, but I congratulated her sincerely, knowing how important that moment was for her. After the announcement, the table filled with excitement for everyone except me. I tried to smile and share my parents' joy, but deep down, I knew Juliana never missed a chance to remind me where I ranked in her imaginary hierarchy. While Dad and Mom peppered her with questions about the dress, the ceremony, and the reception, Juliana shot me a sideways look, pure disdain, the kind that had cut me 1,000 times. Then, in that cold, clipped voice she used when she wanted to crush me, she said, "Gabriel, don't take this the wrong way, but I'd rather you didn't come to the wedding." The silence after those words was brutal, like the air got trapped in everyone's throat. Mom dropped the spoon in her hand, and Dad just stared baffled. A knot seized my stomach. I said nothing and simply watched her, waiting for whatever absurd excuse she'd make. Mom, still confused, asked gently, "Why, Juliana? He's your brother. How could he not be at your wedding?" Juliana sighed dramatically and delivered her verdict, like she was stating the obvious. "I don't want people to know Gabriel is my brother," she said, dripping with disdain. "He doesn't fit the kind of wedding I'm putting on. He doesn't project the image I want." Her cruelty cut like a blade, not because I cared about her opinion, but because she said it in front of our parents, like I was something shameful. She didn't stop there. "He doesn't look good. I don't want my friends, or Esteban's, thinking we come from where he comes from." Dad scowled, shaking his head. "Juliana, that's wrong. Gabriel is your brother. He's part of this family. You can't exclude him from something so important." Mom, uncomfortable, tried to reason with her. He's your blood, Juliana. Family should be together at a time like this. But Juliana didn't show an ounce of remorse. She rolled her eyes and, with a superior flick of her hand, said, "Fine, he can come, but don't expect any special treatment. And Gabriel, please dress decently. I don't want you showing up in old jeans with that sloppy look." I said nothing, just nodded and kept eating, though the food had turned to ash in my mouth. I was hurt beyond the humiliation itself. What stung was realizing how little I mattered to my sister. My parents tried to change the subject, flowers, menus, venues, but I barely heard them. My mind was stuck on the bitter fact that I was an eyesore at Juliana's biggest event. I tried to be strong, but the wound dug deep. Days passed after that awkward lunch, and I tried to keep my distance, but Juliana always found a way back into my life, especially when she needed something. One afternoon, while I was at home going through paperwork, she called. It was unusual for her to phone me, so I knew there was an angle. Her tone was syrupy, almost saccharine, but I could hear the mask. "Gabriel, I need a favor." No hello, no courtesy, just a blunt line that confirmed she wanted something. She explained that she and Esteban were spending most of their money on the wedding, dress, hall, catering, decor, and they had nowhere to live afterward. Everything poured into the party was necessary to project the image they wanted, and a roof would come later. Then she dropped it like it was nothing. "Could we stay in one of your places? The one you rent out, for example. I know it's empty right now." I sat in silence, stunned by her nerve, torn between anger and a lingering urge to help. That house was an important source of income. It had just been vacated, and I planned to find new tenants. That stability mattered. Still, she was my sister, and I hoped that helping might ease things between us. So I took a breath and said, "All right, you can stay there rent-free for a while, until you get on your feet." I expected thanks, some gratitude. Instead I got, "Perfect. Give me the keys tomorrow." And before hanging up, she tossed in another request, dressed up as a casual aside. "And please, Gabriel, at the wedding, don't get near the photos. I don't want people linking us. Nothing personal. I just want everything to look elegant." That line, so cold and cruel, hit harder than anything before. She didn't want me in a single family portrait, like I was a stain to be cropped out. I bit my tongue, swallowed the anger, and said, "Okay, Juliana, I won't be in the photos." She answered great, and hung up, like she'd just closed a minor business deal. Remember, if you enjoy my videos, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. In the days that followed, Juliana turned the house I'd lent her into what she called their love nest. She bought new furniture, elegant curtains, pricey lamps, and decor straight out of design magazines, despite supposedly having no money. I didn't ask where it came from. Probably Esteban's credit cards or debt someone else would pay later. Every time I dropped by to check on something, Juliana acted like the place already belonged to her. She didn't ask my opinion. She never said thank you. She just imposed her taste, as if I were invisible in my own property. Each visit reminded me how little my effort meant to her. The way she moved through the rooms, barking orders at Esteban about furniture placement or how to hang the curtains, made me feel like a stranger in my own home. She didn't ask permission or input. She treated everything like an entitlement earned simply by being my sister. I often stood in silence, watching her talk about her home with such certainty, and wondered if she genuinely believed the house was hers. More than once I was tempted to tell her to slow down, to at least acknowledge the sacrifice I was making by handing over a space that generated income. But I held my tongue, hoping she'd eventually notice on her own. Foolish of me. Juliana never recognized anything. She saw every favor as something she was owed, as if I was obligated to serve her just because we shared blood. And the worst part? Deep down, I still clung to the hope that one day she'd see me as her brother, not a nuisance. The wedding day finally arrived. I woke up with a strange weight in my chest, knowing that nothing I did would be enough for Juliana. Still, I chose to respect her big day. I bought a new suit, nothing flashy, but sharp. I checked myself in the mirror several times, determined not to give her ammunition. I wanted to avoid conflict and do my part not to ruin her ceremony. Whether she deserved it or not, I would honor the moment. This was family, after all. When I arrived, the venue was extravagant. Hanging lights, fresh flowers on every table. Every corner looked pulled from a bridal magazine. Juliana shone in her white gown, surrounded by guests showering her with praise. I approached with a genuine smile, trying to show that, despite everything, I was happy for her. "Hey, Juliana, you look amazing. Congratulations," I said calmly. She barely glanced at me, grimaced, and tossed out a flat, "Yeah, I know," before turning away to talk to someone else. My goodwill got the cold shoulder. During the ceremony, I stayed in the background, back row, out of sight, try not to make anyone uncomfortable. The vows, the music, the applause drifted by like a distant show while I fought the sense that I didn't belong. At the reception, the mood loosened. Laughter, music, plenty of food. I blended in with some cousins and uncles, sharing light conversation that briefly let me forget. But the calm would not last. The family photos were next, and that's where everything blew up. For Juliana, the photos were the second most important part of the day. She wanted every image to reflect the perfection she'd chased. Flawless smiles, dazzling outfits, magazine-worthy poses. Everyone gathered around her and Esteban, posing like celebrities on a set. Our parents, Carlos and Veronica, stood nearby, beaming, ready to appear in every frame. I stayed off to the side, far from the cameras, honoring her demand even though it hurt. But my uncle Roberto, always cheerful, fiercely family-minded, refused to let me be sidelined. In his booming voice, he called me over. "Gabriel, get in here. This is family. You have to be in the picture." Before I could object, he grabbed my arm and pulled me to the center. I resisted, murmuring it wasn't a good idea, but he insisted, laughing, "You can't be missing, nephew. Everyone needs to be in this memory." His enthusiasm was genuine, and I ended up standing right there, in front of the photographer. The camera clicked several times, capturing smiles that, to anyone else, looked happy. I forced a neutral expression, but a knot tightened in my chest. I knew that. Once Juliana noticed, she'd explode. I wasn't wrong. As soon as the shots were done, she rushed to the photographer to review them on the display. I was chatting with my uncle when the shout that froze the room cut through the air. "What is he doing there?" Heads whipped around instantly. Juliana stormed toward me, face flushed, eyes blazing. Her white dress made the red in her cheeks pop, and for a second I thought she might hit me. "I told you not to be in my photos, Gabriel. You ruined everything," she screamed so loudly that the music and chatter died. I tried to stay calm. "Juliana, it wasn't my idea. Uncle pulled me over. She cut me off. I don't care. I asked one simple thing, and you couldn't do it. You're out of my party. I don't want you in my photos. Get out. Now." My parents jumped in immediately. Mom pleaded, "Honey, don't overreact. It's not that serious." Dad's voice was firm. "Juliana, he's your brother. You can't throw him out in front of everyone." Even Uncle Roberto raised his voice. "Come on, Juliana, don't be like that. It was my idea, not his." None of it mattered. With an authoritarian wave, she signaled 2 security guards. In seconds, they flanked me and walked me to the exit while a sea of uncomfortable stares followed. Some guests looked shocked. Others whispered. I kept my head high, but inside I was crushed. As the guards led me out, I heard Juliana yelling at the photographer to delete the images and redo the shots without me, like my presence had contaminated her perfect day. I stepped out with steady strides, but rage and humiliation chewed me up inside. I never felt so rejected, so reduced to nothing. And worst of all, it came from someone who should have been my sister, not my enemy. Out in the parking lot, the cold night air slapped my face and snapped me awake. I walked to my car without a word, trying to process what had happened. The guests were still inside, dancing, eating, laughing, while I left like an uninvited intruder. I started the engine and just sat there, hands clenched on the wheel. Blood pounded in my veins. Deep breaths did nothing. I'd been expelled from a place where I belonged by right, and the person responsible was my own sister. I drove aimlessly through empty streets while the scene replayed on a loop, Juliana screams, the guest's eyes, my parents' failed defense. If I acted then, it would be pure anger, and I didn't want to do something reckless. So I kept driving, letting the road take the edge off. But one thing was crystal clear. Juliana had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. After a while, I parked on a quiet street and stared into nothing. I thought about everything I'd done for her in recent months. Lending her my house, agreeing to stay out of the photos, swallowing her insults. In return, I got contempt and public humiliation. Then like a spark, an idea formed. If Juliana had decided to cut me out of her life, I had the right to set limits too. And that limit would be clear. She wouldn't keep living in a home that represented my hard work. I called a locksmith friend I trusted, someone who'd handle an urgent job, told him I needed the locks changed immediately at one of my properties. No details, he didn't ask. He said he'd be there in an hour. Then I called a couple of buddies who owed me favors, strong, reliable guys, and asked them to help me move heavy furniture that night. I said it was an emergency. They agreed without hesitation. What I planned to do was harsh, sure, but felt right. An hour later, I was in front of the house I'd lent Juliana, waiting for the locksmith. The street was quiet, lit by a few tired streetlights. The silence made it feel like a covert operation. When my friend arrived, we barely spoke. I handed over the old keys, and within minutes he was removing the locks to install new ones. Every turn of his screwdriver felt symbolic, shutting the door not just on Juliana and Esteban, but on years of silent disrespect I'd swallowed. While he worked, my friend arrived, ready to help. I told them we needed to take out all the furniture and belongings Juliana had brought. No questions, they just started hauling. We carried out the bed, the sofa, the dining table, the lamps, even the curtains she'd hung with so much enthusiasm. Every item went into the yard, as if we were stripping a stage set that never should have existed. The work was heavy, but my anger made me strong. With every box I moved, I unloaded some of the weight she'd put on my shoulders. Soon the yard looked like a pop-up warehouse. Furniture stacked on furniture, open boxes spilling clothes, kitchenware, and trinkets Juliana had bought for her palace. Under that yellow streetlight, the irony sunk in. She tried to build the perfect image inside that house, and now it was just a pile on the lawn. My friends were tired but steady, and their looks said what words didn't. This wasn't just a midnight move, it was an act of dignity. When we finished, the place was empty like the day I bought it. Bare walls reclaimed their silence, free from the decor Juliana had hung without asking. I stood in the middle of the living room, listening to my footsteps echo and feeling a strange peace. My friends said their goodbyes with firm handshakes, like comrades after a battle. The locksmith finished, handed me the new keys, shiny, solid, signs the space was mine again. Everything was ready for what I knew was coming. Close to 11, a car pulled up. I knew who it was. Through the window, I watched Juliana step out still in her wedding dress, slightly wrinkled after the long day. Esteban stood beside her, weary but trying to soothe her. When she saw the mountain of furniture on the lawn, she let out a raw scream. What happened? Why are my things outside? Her voice shattered the quiet street. I waited, calm, steady, for the moment to face her. Juliana rushed to the pile, as if touching it would magically put it back inside. She knelt by some open boxes, pulling out clothes and little decorative pieces, her voice climbing higher with every second. This can't be happening. Who did this? She yelled, though deep down she knew exactly who. Esteban tried to calm her with a hand on her shoulder, whispering something. She shrugged him off, blinded by rage and panic. It was surreal, a bride in her white dress, in the middle of the night, fighting with furniture on a lawn. She fished the keys I'd given her from her purse and lunged at the door, fumbling to open it. She tried again and again, each attempt punctuated by a dull thud against the lock. "It won't open. It's not working," she cried, mascara streaking, her perfect image crumbling. She hit the door with her hands, her keychain, even her shoulder, as if brute force could will it open. "This has to be a mistake. This can't be happening." That's when I opened the door, calm, unafraid. I stood in the doorway, looking her straight in the eyes without saying a word at first. She froze. Her face, twisted by rage and tears, tightened even more. "What did you do, Gabriel?" she asked, a mix of disbelief and hate. Esteban, silent until then, stared at me like he couldn't quite process it. I could. This was the inevitable conclusion to her years of humiliation. "Why are my things outside? Why did you change the locks?" she demanded, stepping toward me as if to shove me aside. I stayed calm, arms crossed. "Because this is my house, Juliana. I lent it to you. I've decided I'm not lending it anymore." She screamed, hysterical. "You're insane? We just got married. We need this house. How could you do this to us?" I didn't budge. "I can, and I did, because I'm done with your contempt." Juliana shook with anger, clinging to the doorframe like that could undo my decision. "You're selfish, Gabriel. This is all because you couldn't respect one simple thing. I told you not to be in my photos. You ruined my perfect day." I let out a bitter laugh. "Your perfect day?" Uncle Roberto dragged me into the shots. "Instead of talking to me like a person, you humiliated me in front of everyone, like I was a trespasser. That was your choice." My words hit her harder than any shove. She opened her mouth, but only a strangled sound came out, a mix of fury and despair. "I hate you, Gabriel," she cried, tears streaming. "You're resentful. You always have been. You can't stand me having something better than you." I laughed, dry, humorless. "Better than me? If you think an expensive dress and a lavish wedding are better than respect and dignity, then yes, that's all you've ever chased. Pretending to be what you're not, even if you have to step on your own family to do it." Esteban finally stepped forward, trying to sound firm. "Gabriel, this is cruel. Stop acting like a child. This house isn't just yours anymore. It's the start of our life together. Let us in. Don't be petty." I met his gaze calm, but icy enough that he took half a step back. "This house is mine, Esteban. Your signature and declarations of love, don't hold it up. If you want to defend someone, start by protecting your wife from her own ego. What's happening tonight wasn't caused by me. It was triggered by the way she treats people like garbage." At that, Juliana broke down completely, still in her wedding dress, sobbing as she begged. "Please, Gabriel, don't do this. We spent everything on the wedding. We have nowhere to go. You're my brother. Help me." For a second, seeing her like that shook me. But then I remembered the years of cutting remarks, the time she made me feel small, and the public humiliation hours earlier. I wouldn't let a couple of tears erase all that. "Your brother?" I said, voice cold. "I wasn't your brother when you threw me out of your wedding in front of everyone. I wasn't your brother when you told me not to be in your photos because I embarrassed you. I wasn't your brother when you used my house like it was yours without a thank you. So I'm not your brother now when you want me to save you. Live with your choices, Juliana. You're not welcome here." I shut the door, figuratively and literally. Esteban tried once more. "Gabriel, it's our wedding night. Can't we at least sleep here and talk tomorrow?" I was done negotiating. "No, Esteban. This isn't a crash pad or a newlywed's whim. It's my home, and it stays that way. If you want to start a life together, do it on your own dime, not on years of my work." I closed the door firmly, leaving them outside under the yellow streetlight, in front of the pile of furniture they had thought was theirs. Inside, the house fell silent enough that I could hear my own breathing. Outside, Juliana's sobs mixed with Esteban's attempts to calm her, but I had no intention of opening again. I walked through the empty living room, looked at the bare walls, and realized this place wasn't just property anymore. It was a symbol. It was where I finally set boundaries, where I made it clear my dignity wasn't up for trampling. For the first time in a long time, I felt in control. I sat on the floor, leaned back against the wall, and let the day's exhaustion hit me. Wedding humiliation, anger, and now this strange, quiet calm. I closed my eyes and squeezed the new keys like a talisman. They meant more than access. They were proof I wouldn't be your punching bag anymore. No more concessions. No more silence mistaken for weakness. Minutes passed. Even as Juliana's crying seeped through the windows, I stayed firm. My mind unspooled a reel of her put-downs, mocking my clothes because they weren't designer, calling me poor in spirit for choosing a laid-back night with friends over a pricey restaurant. cracking jokes at family gatherings to make me the punchline. And now, that same person was outside my house, pleading for a roof I'd given freely before. The irony was brutal and fair. Sometime near dawn, fatigue finally knocked me out on the cold floor, the keys still in my fist. When I woke, the first light crept in. I looked outside. There they were, Juliana and Esteban, exhausted, sitting among their stacked furniture, faces drawn, eyes puffy from crying. It was sad, yes, but also the straight line from their choices. I didn't put them there. They made that bed. At 6, a moving truck showed up. 2 sleepy-faced guys started loading everything without a word. Juliana and Esteban stood by, deflated, not even glancing toward my window. Watching each piece disappear from the lawn gave me a strange mix of relief and sorrow. When the truck left, so did they. No goodbye, no words, no backward glance. The street fell quiet. I stood alone in the house I'd once offered in good faith. That morning I knew the decision was harsh, but absolutely necessary. Then my phone rang, my parents. I hesitated, knowing exactly what conversation was coming. I picked up. Mom didn't even say hello. She burst out, "Gabriel, how could you do that to your sister? You left her in the street." The words were sharp and accusing, like I was the sole villain. A stab of pain, and I forced myself to answer evenly. "Mom, I didn't leave her in the street," I said steady. "I lent her my house for weeks, and she repaid me by humiliating me in front of everyone at her wedding. I won't let her treat me like I'm invisible or an embarrassment. What happened last night was the consequence of her own choices." Mom didn't want to hear it. She was stressed, Gabriel. It was her big day. You shouldn't have taken it so personally. You should have understood. That lit the fuse. Same excuse as always. Justified Juliana, blame me. Dad cut in, voice deep, authoritative. "Gabriel, what you did wasn't right. Juliana and Esteban had to sell furniture they bought just to pay for a cheap room last night. They're going through a rough patch, and part of it is because of your decision." My blood boiled. My decision? I snapped. Where were you when she screamed she didn't want me in her photos? When she called security to drag me out like a thief? You always defend her, no matter how much she hurts me. Am I not your son too? Silence on the other end. Mom tried to soften it. "Gabriel, understand, she's the youngest. She's always been more sensitive, more complicated. We have to support her." That didn't calm me. It enraged me. "No, Mom. She's been allowed to do anything she wants. And that's why she thinks she can humiliate anyone without consequences. I'm not obligated to carry her whims or bankroll her fantasies. Enough." My voice shook, not with fear, but with the spine I'd kept buried for years. I ended the call, put the phone on silent, and set it on the empty living room floor. For the first time in ages, I didn't feel guilty after a family fight. Instead, a deep calm settled in. That conversation made something clear. No matter how I explained, my parents would find a way to justify Juliana. I was done living under that favoritism. That morning, sitting on the floor, I realized I'd reclaimed something bigger than a house. My dignity. That afternoon, still turning over my parents' words, I went for a walk. I needed air, space to think. I wandered to a small park where I played as a kid. I sat on a bench watching families enjoy the day, and the irony stung. Those parents seemed proud to be with their kids, while mine left me alone to face Juliana's abuse. It hurt, but it also reinforced my decision not to cave. Memories of childhood bubbled up, moments that explained the present. Juliana had always been the favorite, the baby who got away with everything, because she was the youngest. I had to be responsible, the one who stayed quiet to keep the peace, the one who gave in because you're the older brother. Over time, that became unbearable. She learned to demand without giving. I learned to resign myself in silence, until her wedding night overflowed the cup. Back home at dusk, I found a couple of voicemails. A cousin said he'd seen the blow-up at the wedding and understood why I reacted, though he didn't dare tell her. A close friend congratulated me for drawing a line. Those messages made me smile for the first time in a while. I wasn't entirely alone, even if my parents made me feel like it. Some people knew I hadn't been cruel, I'd been fair. That night, sitting in the empty living room, I thought about what family really means. I used to think it meant unconditional support through thick and thin. But I learned family can also be the place where you're hurt most by unfair comparisons and favoritism that split you open. I realized you're allowed to step back, even from those who share your blood. It isn't selfish, it's emotional survival. And I chose to survive. I went to bed late, mind heavy but oddly light. I slept deeply, free of the nightmares that usually followed fights with Juliana. I woke with renewed conviction. I wouldn't backtrack. I made a decision that drew a before and after in my life. Juliana would have to make it on her own, without using me as a stepping stone. And my parents, no matter how much they insisted, would have to accept I wasn't playing the role of the son who always yields. The following days were a mix of calm and tension. On one hand, I felt relief, control over my life, no more dancing to Juliana's demands. On the other, things with my parents turned colder than ever. They rarely called, and when they did, it was to pressure me to reconsider, as if I alone must keep the family peace. Each call tried to guilt-trip me, but it didn't work like before. Something in me had changed that wedding night. One Sunday, Uncle Roberto showed up, smiling as always, holding a bag of fresh bread. He hugged me hard at the door. "Nephew, I know what happened. I'm sorry the wedding ended like that, but you did the right thing." His words soothed more than I expected. We talked for hours. He reminded me not to carry blame that isn't mine. Sometimes life teaches you the hard way that even blood ties have limits. The important thing is not to lose yourself, he said firmly. I hadn't realized how badly I needed to hear that. Someone was finally validating what I felt, recognizing my act wasn't cruelty, but justice for myself. He admitted he'd noticed the favoritism toward Juliana for years and had wanted to step in, but kept quiet to avoid more conflict with my parents. "Maybe I should have said something sooner," he said. "But at least now I see you have the strength to stand up for yourself." Those words were a balm. That night, after he left, I thought about the importance of surrounding yourself with people who truly support you. Blood isn't enough. You need family of the heart, those who stand by you even when others judge. That insight strengthened my resolve. I wouldn't let Juliana or my parents manipulate me anymore. My worth didn't depend on anyone's approval, least of all from those who always put my sister above me. As days passed, I refocused on my own projects. I got back to work with energy, planned improvements to my properties, and found peace in my routine. It felt like I'd finally shrugged off a backpack full of stones I'd carried for years because of Juliana's contempt. The wound was still there and would take time to heal, but I'd taken a firm step forward. Even if the road with my family was cracked, I now walked lighter, with my head high. Time moved on, but the family tension didn't. My parents kept insisting I should make peace with Juliana, as if everything could be erased with a hug. Each time we spoke, they downplayed her behavior and magnified my reaction, casting me as the one who broke the harmony. That narrative had no power over me anymore. I'd spent too long accepting guilt that wasn't mine, and I refused to backslide. The wound from that wedding night wasn't something a flimsy apology could heal. Juliana leaned hard into the victim role. I heard from relatives that she told people I'd thrown her out for no reason, that I'd done it out of envy, that I ruined the start of her marriage out of pure selfishness. Hearing those distortions frustrated me, but it also confirmed something: she would never own the truth. It was easier to paint me as the villain than face her own mistakes. At a family gathering weeks later, I saw her again. The tension was palpable the second I walked in. She avoided my eyes, and when she did look my way, it was that old mix of hatred and contempt. My parents tried small talk, but we were all tiptoeing through a minefield. I stayed polite and refused to take the bait. I knew arguing with someone who never admits fault was pointless. Interestingly, some relatives had shifted in how they treated me. Maybe they saw the wedding scene for themselves, or maybe they were finally realizing Juliana wasn't the innocent victim she claimed to be. A few gave me pats on the back. Others whispered words of support, scared she might hear. That quiet validation reminded me that truth has a way of surfacing, no matter how someone tries to bury it. The gathering ended like so many before it, Juliana and I at opposite ends of the room, not speaking, my parents straining to keep a peace that no longer existed. But I left with certainty etched into me. I had nothing to prove. I'd acted with dignity. She could cast me as a monster. I knew the truth. The only peace that truly matters is the peace you have with yourself, not with the facade someone else tries to uphold. As weeks rolled by, Juliana and Esteban began to feel the consequences of their choices. After blowing their savings on the wedding and losing access to my house, reality hit hard. I heard they'd moved into a small apartment in a much more modest neighborhood than Juliana would have ever accepted before. At first, I thought the experience might humble her, make her reflect. But true to form, she preferred blaming me to owning her part. Family rumors didn't stop. Every gathering was a chance for her to repeat her script. I took away her dream out of resentment. I'd always been jealous. I listened to these second-hand tales with a mix of sadness and resignation. Instead of defending myself, I chose silence. People who want to believe her will, and the rest will figure it out in time. My parents kept up the pressure. Every call was another plea to be understanding, to talk to Juliana and reconcile. "She's your sister," they repeated, as if that one word erased years of contempt and a public spectacle that scarred me. I answered calmly, though it hurt. She made her choices. She needs to face them. I've already done more than my share. It was hard to hold the line. I'd always wanted to please my parents. But I couldn't keep sacrificing my peace for a broken relationship. Little by little, my life felt lighter without Juliana at the center. I dove into my projects, cared for my properties, and spent time with people who truly valued me. My circle of friends became a refuge, proving that family can be built beyond blood. Every afternoon, I spent laughing without being judged. Every conversation without a joke at my expense reminded me I'd chosen right. There were moments of nostalgia. I remembered little Juliana, the kid I used to play with before vanity and obsession with appearances took over. It hurt to accept that version of her was gone, buried under layers of pride and superficiality. But accepting it also freed me. I couldn't keep waiting for her to change. She might never. What I could do was protect myself and learn to live without the emotional chains I'd carried for years. I realized my decision didn't only redefine my relationship with Juliana, it redefined me. Closing that door literally and figuratively opened another. I no longer saw myself as the sideline brother or the son who always gave in. I saw someone who could draw clear lines. That freedom felt new, powerful, even a little scary at first. But day by day, I learned to enjoy it. I wasn't a shadow others could push around anymore. My parents stayed stuck on the idea that I should back down. On a visit to my place, Mom pressed again. "Gabriel, can't you at least talk to your sister? She's suffering." I took a breath. "Mom, don't confuse suffering with consequence. She's paying for what she did, and I'm not responsible for rescuing her every time she makes a bad decision." Dad tried to be neutral, but I could see he didn't agree. That rift hurt, yes, but it didn't make me waver. Meanwhile, signs piled up that Juliana and Esteban were struggling. Relatives said they argued constantly about money, that bills from the banquet and decor were mounting, and the shine of that perfect wedding had faded fast. Part of me felt pity. I know how hard it is to face reality after living in a bubble. But another part knew it was inevitable. Juliana tried to build happiness on a facade. Facades eventually crack. That inner tug-of-war made me think a lot about empathy. I didn't wish her ill, but I wouldn't be her lifeline. I wanted her to learn that actions have consequences and life doesn't always hand you second chances. The distance was hard, but it was healthiest for both of us. If one day she truly learned from this, I'd be willing to listen. But I wouldn't force a reconciliation while she kept blaming me for everything. And so I rediscovered myself. I invested time in hobbies, traveled with friends, and revived projects I'd shelved because of family drama. Life really is lighter when you stop carrying backpacks that aren't yours. For the first time in years, I felt real inner peace, a calm that didn't depend on Juliana's opinion or my parents' expectations. It was the start of a new chapter, with me as the lead in my own story. Months later, my life had settled into something steady, work, properties, relationships with people who added value. But news about Juliana and Esteban still trickled in, and it was rarely good. Financial pressure kept rising. Fights had become routine. What began as a romance wrapped in luxury and make-believe had turned into a daily struggle to get by. I listened with mixed feelings. Part of me wished them well, not to justify them, but because it hurts to watch a relationship decay so fast. The other part felt it was the lesson Juliana needed. All her life, she operated like she could belittle others and still skate by. Life was showing her you can't build happiness on arrogance and contempt. Then I got an unexpected text from Esteban. "Gabriel, can we talk?" I hesitated, and then agreed to meet at a nearby cafe. He arrived, looking wrecked, dark circles, slumped shoulders. After some silence, he admitted Juliana was unbearable, blamed him for everything, and even said their bad luck was my fault. None of it surprised me. That's how Juliana handles accountability. She outsources it. "Gabriel," he said, "I know I'm not in a position to ask, but she's lost. If you could just talk to her, maybe she'd come around." I stared at him, empathetic but clear. With respect, that's not my role. I'm not the person who has to wake her up. If people keep justifying her, she'll never change. He dropped his gaze, disappointed, but he needed to hear it. After we parted, I realized how defeated Esteban seemed. On their wedding day, he'd been confident and proud. Now reality had stripped that shine. It confirmed what I already knew. The glow of appearances always fades when there's nothing underneath. I also knew the story wasn't over. There'd be more attempts to drag me into her drama. But I was done playing. A few days later, Mom invited me to a family talk at their house. I figured it was a setup to pressure me into forgiving Juliana, but I went anyway, not to cave, but to make my stance crystal clear. The tension was thick. My parents sat in the living room. Juliana, pale and tired, hunched in a corner. After several minutes of silence, Mom spoke. "Gabriel, we want you two to talk. You're siblings. You can't go on like this." Juliana glanced at me with more wounded pride than genuine remorse. I breathed and spoke firmly. "Mom, Dad, I don't hate Juliana. I don't want her to suffer. But I won't be the doormat she steps on whenever she feels like it. I want to erase what happened at her wedding, or all the years before, with some empty apology." The room went cold. Instead of humility, Juliana exploded. "You always play the victim. If people see me badly, it's because you pay me that way. You're resentful." It hurt, but gave me clarity. I looked her in the eye. "I don't need to paint you as anything. Your actions speak for you." I drew a line. If you want things to change, start by owning what you did. Until then, there's nothing to discuss. She clenched her jaw and went silent. My parents tried to mediate. "Both of you should give a little," but I wouldn't. "This isn't about compromise," I said. "It's about respect. And until Juliana understands that, I'll keep my distance." I stood, grabbed my things, and headed for the door. Before leaving, I looked at my parents, sad but resolute. "I love you, but I won't keep playing a game where I'm always the culprit. If you truly want unity, stop justifying the unjustifiable." I closed the door, feeling like a tie had snapped, but also feeling true to myself. After that meeting, I knew things had changed forever. This wasn't a passing spat. It was a deep break in what we thought family meant. I planted my feet, and though it hurt, it was freeing. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of being labeled selfish. I was done carrying guilt that wasn't mine. The weight began to lift. Days grew quieter, tinged with distance. Fewer calls from my parents. When they came, they were short and cool, as if they, too, were wounded. I knew they loved me, but their view was too clouded by favoritism. That chill sometimes made me feel alone, but I preferred dignified solitude over a toxic dynamic that drained me. It was a high price, but the right one for my peace. Meanwhile, Juliana and Esteban kept struggling. More debt, more fights, the perfect couple facade crumbling for all to see. Relatives said Juliana no longer smiled like before. She looked tired and worn. I didn't rejoice or mourn. It was simply the logical outcome of a life built on appearances. Reality always catches up. One evening, sitting on my balcony with a cold beer, I replayed everything. The wedding, the shouting, the humiliation, the door closing on Juliana in her wrinkled dress, the furniture stacked under the streetlight, the tears that didn't move me, my parents telling me to understand her. I landed on a clear conclusion. I didn't regret it. It was hard, but it was the only way to stop being her constant target. I realized that, painful as it was, the entire ordeal taught me one of life's most important lessons. Dignity is non-negotiable. You can lose relationships, face criticism, carry the discomfort of being judged, but you must never lose self-respect. When everything else crumbles, the one thing that holds you up is knowing you stayed true to who you are. That certainty, finally, was mine. Over the months, I learned to live with family distance without feeling guilty. Some days it hurt, not having the close relationship I'd imagined with my parents. Yes, I missed what could have been a healthy bond with Juliana, but I also felt lighter, freer, and most of all, at peace with myself. By drawing boundaries, I didn't just protect a house. I protected my dignity, my calm, and my right to choose how I live. That was the greatest win to come out of something so bitter. Juliana and Esteban went on with their lives, shadowed by financial strain and marital trouble. Some said she still blamed me for everything, that in her story, I was the villain. I no longer cared. I stopped carrying the weight of what others think or say about me. People will always talk. The only opinion with power over your life is your own. That realization gave me a strength I'd never felt. My parents slowly accepted my decision, never fully, but enough to stop pressuring me. They understood I wouldn't bend. They stayed closer to Juliana, but they stopped hounding me to fix it. I did my part too. I visited when I could and helped where it made sense, without letting their favoritism undo me. It was an odd balance, but it brought a measure of stability. I learned I didn't need a perfect family to feel whole. In the end, I took away something invaluable. Family isn't always unconditional love. Sometimes family is where you're hurt most, where you're judged hardest, where you're valued least. And it's okay to step away if that's what it takes to protect your mental and emotional health. I learned it late, but in time to stop repeating a cycle that was consuming me. In that sense, Juliana's wedding, her disaster, became my turning point. Looking back now, I have no regrets. Maybe I'll never be close to Juliana again. Maybe my parents will always see her as a child to be protected. But I don't live for their approval anymore. I got my house back, yes, but more importantly, I got my dignity back. And even though it hurts, I learned that true freedom isn't always about making peace with others. It's about making peace with yourself. That's the part of the story that marked me forever. Remember, if you enjoy my videos, don't forget to subscribe to the channel.